Whether you're building a new home or adding on, framing up the situation, or putting a roof over your head, if you need to rock it, roll it, or just get on with it, Hometime has a video to help you do it right. Transform your small bathroom into a luxurious master bath, or increase your home's value by updating your old kitchen. Keep your drains draining, your switches switching, and your footing firm. Whether you do it yourself or buy it yourself, Hometime's how-to video guides will help you get the results you want. Will make your next project a success. See your local home improvement retailer for the Hometime video that's right for you.
Really gonna stick your hand down in there?
I just keep telling myself it's only groundwater.
Sure you don't mind?
No. Hi, welcome to Hometime. I'm Dean Johnson.
Hi, I'm Robin Hartl, and today we're going to be firing up a new project, which is finishing off the basement in this house. The first thing that we're going to do is put in a sump pump.
Yeah, that should take care of it. I had to get some rock out of the way to get this thing pumped. Boy, that water is really cold.
I bet.
Well, this house was built about a year ago. When the builder built it, he put a sump in, but he didn't include a pump and a way of ejecting the water out of the house, which is really fairly typical. So before we do any finishing off down here, we want to get all this set up so we don't have any future moisture problems.
For a lot of people, the basement is the most economical way to squeeze a little extra living space out of their homes. In this basement, we'll be adding a home office, a bedroom, a bathroom, and a family room. We'll show you the whole construction process, but we'll concentrate on things that are unique to finishing off a basement, like the sump pump, a new bedroom egress window, moving drain pipes under the concrete floor, putting in new walls, insulating the foundation and insulating for sound control, and special techniques for installing flooring on a concrete slab.
Hometime is made possible by Chevy full-size pickup, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickup on the road. The national PBS series Hometime is made possible by the Stanley Works. Since 1843, Stanley has been committed to building quality tools and other products to help you do things right. At Hometime, we believe the best way to get the job done is to use the finest tools.
And this Chevy full-size pickup is one of our favorites. Equipped with an optional Vortec 5700 V8 engine, it generates 255 horsepower and 330 foot-pounds of torque to power you through the toughest jobs.
And with the optional third door, you've got lots of room for all your other tools.
And friends to help you use them.
At home or on the job site.
For work or play,
it's no wonder we at Hometime count on Chevy full-size pickups.
The most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
Well, there's a couple things about this lower level that makes it a real good candidate for finishing off. Well, for one thing, they use floor trusses down here. What I mean by that are 2x4s that are engineered to carry weight for long distances. Well, for instance, in our situation, going from the back of the house to the front of the house, it spans 24 feet. Now, had they used regular dimensional lumber, they would have probably had to put a bearing wall in somewhere in here, or at least a beam to carry this weight, which would have brought it down into this neck of the woods. But by using floor trusses, it leaves everything wide open, so you can pretty much do anything you want to with the design.
And as you can see with the floor trusses, you can easily run wiring, ductwork, and pipes through them. You don't have to cut a bunch of holes like you do with joists, and you don't have to drop large ductwork down underneath the framing, which can cut into your headroom. Now all we need to do is run the pipes from the sump pump through the trusses and over to the sidewall. You got that?
Yeah, it looks real good over here.
Okay. Now the sump pump collects groundwater from the drain tile, which is installed underneath the basement floor.
And the drain tile is round 4-inch plastic pipe with holes in the side to let water get in. Now the theory is that the groundwater should, actually let me draw you a little picture and that can be the best way to describe it. Okay, now let's say this is the basement floor, and then this is the footing underneath, or not the basement floor, the basement wall, the footing underneath, and then this is the basement floor right here. Architects always like to draw little circles to show you that this is concrete, so we'll do a few of those. Okay, now your drain tile goes in this area, right next to the footing. In fact, I'll even make this three-dimensional so you know exactly what we're talking about. And now the idea is to have waterproofing on the outside of the foundation and along the outside of the footing. So if any water does get along in this area, it flows underneath the footing, and we should have quite a bit of gravel around this drain tile, so it's real easy for that water to flow into the drain tile and exit to wherever your sump basket is.
But with this system, isn't the problem that you're putting a lot of faith in your waterproofing?
Well, it's true. If you do get some water pooling up in this area, if it can't go any lower than that and your waterproofing fails, you definitely will end up with water on that wall. Now, so if you have water coming through the wall, drain tile on the inside isn't going to do you a lot of good. You need drain tile on the outside of the foundation. Okay, so let's say this is the basement wall again. Whoop, popped right through it. This is the footing underneath. Now this is the outside of the wall. We would want the drain tile to be located right here. And on top of that, we would place gravel up against the side of the foundation, so any water that would come down along the side of the foundation wouldn't be trapped and forced, what they call hydrostatic pressure, through the wall, but instead could easily flow through the gravel down into the drain tile.
But with that system, you still have the problem of trying to get rid of the water. I mean, it's collecting in this tube about 8 feet below ground level. So do you install a pump way down at the bottom of the wall, or do you bring the water inside and install an inside sump pump?
Well, you kind of get the idea. There's a lot of techniques and philosophies for keeping a basement dry, and of course pros and cons for all of them.
Anyway, we didn't have much choice as to which system we wanted. The house came with the inside drain tile, and that's what we have to deal with.
Now, one thing we did run into here is we have a little bit of seepage along our bottom block. Evidently, water seeped up from the top of the footing. So this is something we're going to have to deal with. Hopefully, by pulling water out of our sump, we'll keep the water level down in the footings and we won't have that seepage. But if you are finding moisture in your basement, there is a real good test to do. What we've done is taped a couple pieces of plastic, one on the wall and then one on the floor. Now, if you have seepage coming through the wall or the floor, after you leave this up a couple of days, you'll find moisture on the inside of the plastic, on the back side. But if there's humidity in your basement that's condensing, you'll find moisture on the outside of the plastic. Fortunately for us, we don't see moisture either place.
Now, you can buy flexible sump pump hose, but for a permanent installation, the local building codes require that you use rigid pipe coming from the sump pump to the outside wall. So we've got PVC pipe here coming up from the sump pump. We've got a check valve and 2 hard rubber hoses on either side. And the rubber is to keep the vibration from the pump from traveling up the PVC pipe. And the check valve is so that when the pump is shut off, any remaining water left over in the vertical pipe doesn't just flow right back down into the sump.
We've run our drain line as high as we could here so we get a real good slope from this point over to the exterior wall. And the way that we handled that is we took a, if I can get this thing off here, we took a 90-degree L and turned that into a couple of 45s to get the water running downhill again. There you go.
Okay.
Where your sump water ends up is pretty important. What works best is to bring the PVC through the wall and down into the ground, and then run flexible plastic pipe underground so that the water discharges somewhere far away from the house. Now, besides installing a sump pump, there are some important preventative steps you should take to make sure that the water never gets near your basement in the first place. Now, probably the best way to ensure that you don't have a wet basement is to make sure that you have plenty of grade coming away from the side of the house. In fact, I think it's code in some areas to have 1-inch drop for every foot for the first 6 feet coming out. I don't need a laser level to calculate something like this. All I need is a 2x4, a level, and measuring tape. Put the 2x4 up against the house, get a good level position. If you're working with a 6-foot 2x4 like we're working here, you should have at least 6 inches of exposure here on the very end. Gutters can also help keep water away from the foundation, but they have to be working properly. And the downspouts and leaders need to direct the water away from the side of the house. A downspout that just dumps water next to the foundation can actually make the basement wetter. Okay, all set to nail?
Yep.
All right. Well, one thing you'll learn very quickly if you're planning on adding a bedroom to a basement, and that is that you need an egress window. Now, that's because code requires that every bedroom needs a window you can escape through if there's a fire. Now, many times you'll already have existing windows that you can use as egress windows, but in our case we wanted a bedroom in this corner, so consequently we do have to put one in. Something you might want to take into consideration when you're laying out your plan.
Well, this type of basement is called a daylight basement, which is one where the floor of the basement is 3 to 4 feet below the outside ground level. I guess I call them daylight basements because there's usually a couple of windows at least that are big enough to allow sunlight in. And because this is a daylight basement, we don't have to cut through concrete to make the opening for the window. We can just work above the concrete right through the wood framing.
Now the first thing that we did is cleared studs out in the area where the window was going to go. Then we installed our king studs on either side, and we just finished putting up the header and the trimmer studs that support the header. Help you out a little bit with that. Now whenever you're cutting into an exterior wall, you always have to install a header to support the weight above it. Now fortunately this is a gable end here on this side of the house, so we aren't supporting all the roof weight. So we were able to go with 2 laminated 4-inch beams, and then we just furred it out with this 2x to make it the same size as our 2x6 walls. This will maximize the amount of space here we have for the window. Now we want to raise this window up just a little bit, so I'm going to add this piece of 3/4 inch material to give us just a little bit more area to put some casing on the bottom of the window or possibly even stick in a ledge.
Okay, I can go ahead and nail this down.
Okay, I'll grab the saw. And now we're ready to cut out the sheathing. And to do that, we'll use a reciprocating saw. We'll just run it around the inside here of our rough opening. Okay, that should be it. Go ahead and push it out.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, I'll start on this one.
All right.
Okay, go ahead and
Okay.
lift this thing up.
Okay.
Right about there?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. I've caulked around the outside. That's so we get a real good seal. How's that looking, Robin?
Okay, I just need to bring it this way a little.
Okay. Is that pretty well centered?
Yeah, good right there.
Okay, once it's centered, then we want to lightly nail, or I should say loosely nail, the high corner here. Okay, you can go ahead and shim it.
All right.
Of course, we want to do all of our shimming on the inside so we can get the shims directly underneath the framing of the unit.
Okay.
Now, clad in fiberglass windows usually have these nailing flanges around the outside. In fact, that's why we had to remove all this siding so we could get at this area. Now, once this window's all nailed off, we'll go ahead and trim our siding back down and bring it right up to the edge of this window, which will cover up this flange. How's it looking in there?
Good.
Okay, I can go ahead and nail this off. Now, to do that, I'm using 1 3/4 galvanized nails.
For a window to qualify as a bedroom egress window, it has to open up to certain dimensions. See, I made a copy of a page of the building code book. Here we go. It's kind of interesting to look up the actual regulations. Okay, it's right here. Escape or rescue windows shall have a minimum net clear openable area of 5.7 square feet. The minimum net clear openable height dimension shall be 24 inches. The minimum net clear openable width dimension shall be 20 inches. In plain English, that means that when the window is open, we should have a minimum of 5.7 square feet of open space. The width should be a minimum of 20 inches, and the height should be a minimum of 24 inches. And it shouldn't be any higher than 44 inches off the floor. All right. Well, now that we're done tearing into the walls, I suppose we can start busting up the concrete floor. We need to move some pipes under the concrete floor to install a drain for the shower and the bathroom. The toilet and the sink already have drain lines in the right places. And we start by using a masonry blade and a circular saw to cut a groove about 1/4 inch deep around the area of concrete we want to remove. Then we busted out the concrete by beating on it with a sledgehammer. This little area took about an hour of pounding. If the job were any bigger, we'd probably rent an electric jackhammer. Now after that, we dug down and exposed a drain line that we could hook into with a new piece of pipe and some rubber connectors.
When we went to the home center store to pick up connectors to hook up our Y fitting, it got to be a little confusing. I think that's the way it is with a lot of plumbing parts. It really helps to get a little assistance and do your homework so you know exactly what it is you're going to be picking up to hook things up. And I brought back a couple of different ones to show you. That should do it. Now it looks like they all should work, but this is the one our plumber recommended. Let's see, it's a number 1056-33. It's a good thing he did. This is only about $3, whereas this one is what, $8? And this one's just a little under $5. Plus he thought this would probably be the easiest one to install. He said the way that it works best is if you use a little bit of hand soap on the inside, kind of smear that around, and then it just seems to slide on a whole lot easier. Now, these all work about the same. A rubber sleeve with metal clamps on to hold everything in place. Slide this on here. Now you do have to get these all the way back beyond the original drain. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now our Y clamp, we have cut a couple of pieces and we glued those on the end, so this will fit right down in the middle here. Oh, it'd be nice to have a couple of extra set of hands right now. Okay. Okay, get that in place. The clamps right where we can adjust them. Okay. Okay, now once I get everything situated here, I want to make sure that our pipe has the right pitch on it. Now we know that we want a 1/4 inch drop for every foot in these drain lines, so of course everything will flow downhill properly. Okay, now I know that when the bubble in the level is just slightly past that line, like that, then we have the right slope on our drain line. So I'll get it situated just like so. And go ahead and tighten this thing down. Okay, now I'll just keep running our drain line over into the corner. I have the perfect slope on this pipe. I marked it right here at the joint so I can pull this out and get these all permanently connected. So first I want to get cleaner on both the outside of the pipe and the inside, and then do the same thing with the glue. Okay, slide this back in position, nice and tight, and then double check our slope here again. Well, we pretty well have all of our drain lines wrapped up. Now this is the drain for the shower, and this pipe sticking out eventually will tie into all the vents up in the ceiling, but of course we're not going to hook that up until we get this wall framed in this area, and we can't frame that up until we pour this concrete. And I don't think we'll do that until we get the plumbing inspector back over to sign off on everything we've done here.
Once we got our plumbing inspection, we filled the hole up with sand, put a wood frame around the drain pipe, and began to top it off with concrete.
Once the concrete cures, we'll start building our new walls.
Now, most houses have either concrete block or poured concrete on at least some of the basement walls. In this daylight walkout basement, on 3 of the walls in the space, we've got concrete block on the bottom and framing on the top. But on the walkout side, we have framing that goes all the way down to the bottom.
Now, if you've got concrete or block, you'll have to create some type of surface to attach the drywall to. Plus, you'll probably want to add a little bit of additional insulation and have some room for switches and outlets. So you'll probably end up with some type of frame surface.
In this basement, we're building short walls out of 2x2s to go against the half-height block walls. We apply construction adhesive to the floor where the wall will sit.
All the way. Okay, ready to go down?
Then we tilt it up and use a powder-actuated nailer to drive special nails through the plate and into the concrete floor. We also nail small treated blocks across the ledge and into the exterior wall framing. This helps keep the top of the wall in place.
This is a different basement, and it's a space where I can't build a wall on the floor and tip it up. So I'm piecing the framing together in place. I snapped a chalk line on the concrete floor where the framing will be, and I apply construction adhesive to the floor between the line and the wall. Then I set the bottom plate on the floor and secure it with a powder actuated nailer. I use a level and a straight 2x4 to mark the location for the top plate on the underside of the joist. I do this at both ends of the wall and then snap a chalk line between them. I nail the top plate up into the joist along this line. Now I'm ready for the studs. Since the flooring and the ceiling might not be straight and level, I measure the studs one at a time. I set the 2x4 on the bottom plate, mark where it crosses the top plate, and cut it off at the mark. Then I hammer it into place and toenail it into the plates. I'm using 2x4s for this wall. A 2x4 wall is easier to insulate and install electrical in. But a 2x4 wall does eat up a little bit more floor space than a 2x2 wall. Now, let's get back to our main basement and look at what we do to install interior walls. All right, we'll do it again.
Okay. Now if you're going to build the walls on the floor and then tilt them up into place, you want to build them at least 1/4 of an inch shorter than the actual clearance that you've got. Otherwise, you're going to end up getting the wall stuck on the ceiling framing.
Now, as we mentioned before, we built the wall about 1/4 inch short, but it still will, like in Robin's area down there, get to be a little tight. Of course, that's because the floor is never level in a lower level like this. But in a lot of spots, it will be loose, so what we'll do in places like this is just take a shim, slide it underneath the joist above, tap it in place so it gets fairly snug. Back on the line, and then we'll just nail a sinker through the shim up into the joist.
Well, the next wall that's going to get built is the one that goes across here. But for this wall, we have to put some blocking in this exterior wall in the stud cavity to give us something to nail to. To put in the blocking, we have to peel back the plastic vapor barrier and nail pieces of 2x4 between the wall studs. There we go. Now this wall isn't as long as the other one, but it is actually a bit heavier because we have openings in here for doors. And openings require headers, and headers make everything a little bit top heavy. Okay, I'm going to get the ladder.
There you go. Now, next thing that we'll be doing on the plumbing is to finish up our drain, waste, and vent. Now, if you remember, we busted up our concrete floor to extend the drain for the new shower. Now, every fixture, in fact, every drain needs a vent, so this will be the vent for the drain. We'll route it up through this new wall, tie it into the existing vent in the basement, and then eventually this makes its way up through the roof. Now, when the plumber built the home, or when the plumber did the work on it when the house was new, he used this ABS or black pipe. I think you'll find that it's easier for do-it-yourselfers to find more parts available using the white or the PVC pipe. Now, one way to make the connection between these two is with a screw type connection. We'll take the black ABS, connect it to the PVC, and then put this into the new T that we already have installed in the line up here. So bring it through the T, like so. Get that hooked in there, and then come down here at a 45-degree angle, cut through our top plate, and then route this up like so. It gets a little tricky. Say, Robin, could you help me out with a couple measurements here?
Sure.
Okay, yeah, we're just going to kind of cut everything and dry fit it so that if we don't get the measurement quite right, it's not too big a deal.
Let me mark this. Yeah, Terry, our plumber friend, was over here the other day kind of helping us plan things out. And he started explaining how you could triangulate the length of this piece by measuring the distance between the two pipes and then multiplying that by the square root of 2 and then subtracting like an inch or something for the 45-degree.
Hypotenuse.
Yeah, and then
in other words,
another.
we'll be using the trial and error method.
Yeah.
Okay, I think 3 1/4 should be our first
Okay, you
attempt.
got it?
Yeah, I'm going to cut this one up to
All
begin
right.
with. Get any of this on you here.
Okay.
All right, now we got everything cut and test fit, and that's all looking pretty good. In fact, I have to tell you, we only had to cut this piece twice. Now the trick in doing this is you want to determine which is going to be the last piece in. You have to be able to spread your apparatus out here a little bit so you can fit it in, and then get it together good and tight and be able to spin it around a corner of a turn so everything is fitting very snugly. Okay, that should be good. Okay, I'm going to turn off the water.
Okay. Well, the heating contractor has come and gone. It took one guy about 2.5 days to make the runs for all the spaces down here. He was able to keep everything up in the ceiling and not have anything come down into the living space. And that's one real advantage to having floor trusses rather than the solid joists. There's lots of room up here for ducts and stuff like that. Right now, Dean and I are plugging away at the plumbing and electrical work.
Well, we finished up the drain lines. Now we're working on the water supply lines. So, of course, we'll have to tap into the water, which means that every now and again we have to turn the water off. What I'm doing right now is opening up the faucet for the tub, flushing the toilet, and opening up the faucet for the sink so that all the standing water will drain down into the laundry room faucet that I just opened up. Okay, it should only be about 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay. Well, there are 8 of these cans that provide the general lighting for the main room. And then there's a fixture that is in the middle of the room that hangs down a little bit that will go over the pool table. And what I'm doing now is I'm running the cable that goes in between them. Now, all the cans will switch on and off at the same time, so you can just sort of daisy chain them together.
Now, to minimize the amount of time that you spend with the water shut off, what works best is to start plumbing where the fixture will be and then work your way back to where you'll actually tie into the water supply line. Now, we're putting in a couple lines here for the wet bar, and we'll run these up to the lines for our shower upstairs. Well, you'll find that 90% of the time when you're doing plumbing in a lower level, you'll end up working up between floor joists on pipes. Not the easiest place to cut and clean and everything else, but it's pretty much about the only way you can deal with it. Just sort of a fact of life. Now, the first thing you want to do once you cut the pipes is to sand off all the oxidation. I'm using an emery cloth to do this. Now, once you get them sanded, you don't want to touch the sanded part with your fingers because the oil from your hands can keep the solder from sticking. And to help the solder stick, I'm going to flux up the ends of all the pieces before we make any final connections.
Well, with recessed cans, since the fixture is buried in the ceiling, you really need to make the final connections at this stage. With normal light fixtures, you would just bring the wires into the electrical box and then you could make the connections at the end of the job when you install the lights. And what I'm doing right now is I'm twisting together the hot, neutral, and ground wires. Now, this cable here brings the power in. The wires in here power up just this fixture, and then this cable sends the power out to the next fixture. Now, this part is pretty simple. However, all of these need to get connected to two three-way switches, and that is where it gets a lot more complicated.
Okay, now everything's cleaned and fluxed. I'm just going to solder the last couple of joints together. All right, now I want to put the flame up against the coupling. Now you want to have the tip of the blue flame touching the coupling. Nope, you don't want to do that. Give it a try. No, not quite ready yet. Wait just a little bit. Okay, there we go. I'm putting the solder on the opposite side of the flame because the solder is drawn toward the heat. All right, that should do it. Okay, sounds good. I think I'll cut that pipe off then.
Oh, okay. Well, right now we're finishing up with the electrical and the plumbing rough ends. The last thing that we need to do on the plumbing is to install this acrylic shower base. And we're combining this with ceramic tile on the walls. And you can buy complete acrylic shower stall units with the bottom and the sides. If you decide to go with one of those, you want to make sure to get it into place before you frame in the doorway, otherwise you're never going to fit it in the room. Anyway, what I'm doing right now is putting together the drain hardware while Dean is cutting the pipe to the right height.
Now when we poured our concrete floor, we left a little area so that we could move this drain around. But now that we know exactly where our shower base is going, we set this drain so that it lands directly in the center of the drain hole for the shower base. This way it lines up real well with the hardware and we don't have to worry about any leaks.
Okay, I'll sit here.
All right. All right. Okay, why don't we do
I'll
it
just grab it through here
backwards
again.
of what we did before, right?
Yep.
Get past it. Now it's caught over here.
There we
I
go.
think I'll level it out. Now we framed up these walls so this shower base would fit just right. So getting it in here can be a little...
Maybe if you get on that side, we can start leveling.
I think I have to get it up just a little bit. Okay, there we go. If you can
Got
bring
it.
your side down, keep it tight in the back. Okay, let me get this pipe in there. All right, we can go ahead and take it down. All right, good. Okay.
All right, well, I'm going to go back to wearing those cans.
All right. Now the drain assembly comes with a little gasket to seal to the pipe. Now this is a pretty tight fit, so I'm going to use some liquid soap here so it slides on just a little bit easier. Smear this around. That should do it. I just want to slip this in between our PVC and drain assembly. And sometimes using a wood shim helps out in the persuasion process a little bit. That's getting in there. Many times when you install a shower unit like this, you'll set it on top of a layer of mortar or concrete to help support the base so it doesn't bend or flex at all. With this pretty solid unit, it holds its shape so we're able to set it directly on the concrete floor. Now it's just a matter of nailing it into the studs.
Well, once the building department has signed off on the framing and the mechanical rough ends, then you can go ahead and put in the insulation and put up the wallboard. Now, insulating is really going to depend a lot on what's already been done to the house and the building codes in your area. For this new house with a daylight basement, one set of rules applied.
For walls where we furred out with 2x2s, we got rigid foam insulation that was 1.5 inches thick. We cut it into strips that were 14.5 inches wide and fit them between the 2x2s. Now it took a lot of trimming and fitting to get them in snugly.
For walls where we had furred out with 2x4s, we were able to use fiberglass insulation. This is just like standard exterior wall insulation, and this is the technique you'd use for a full height 2x4 wall too.
If you want to try putting your insulation and framing up at the same time, you might investigate this system. It's a rigid foam insulation board that comes 24 inches wide and 8 feet tall. The pieces have small notches along the log edges. The notches form a small pocket that a 1x3 will fit in exactly. Pre-drill with a masonry bit through the 1x3, through the foam insulation, and at least 1 1/4 inches into the concrete or block. Then use hardened masonry screws to attach the wood to the concrete. The wood strips hold the insulation in place. And since the wood strips are 24 inches apart, you can attach a finishing material like drywall directly to them.
In a basement, you may also want to think a little about sound insulation. For instance, we installed a special fiberglass insulation to cut down on sound transmission between this bedroom and the office next door. The insulation is cut to fit into standard 2x4 wall cavities, and it's got paper backing on one side that makes it pretty easy to staple it to the surface of the studs.
We also experimented with putting some insulation in the ceiling above the basement family room to cut sound transmission to the bedrooms above it. We used the standard insulating product for this. It's 3.5 inches thick and 23 inches wide, so it fits between our floor trusses. We use short pieces of stiff wire that we stick between the trusses to hold the insulation in place. Once the insulation was done and inspected, we did our drywall work. Hanging and taping drywall takes a specialized set of tools and skills. Hanging drywall involves cutting the sheets to the proper length, hoisting them into place on the ceiling or walls, and then nailing or screwing them into the framing. In the bedroom area, we use metal furring strips between the framing and the drywall. Now these are a further way to reduce the amount of sound that gets transmitted from one space to the other. Once the drywall is up, it generally takes 5 different steps to get a smooth surface where the pieces meet. Now the first step is to pre-fill the joints with joint compound. Then we put on a layer of tape and smooth it out. Then comes 2 more layers of joint compound. And finally, we sand down the surfaces. You'll also probably want to texture the ceilings, which is the easiest way to hide any imperfections. Drywall taping takes a lot of patience and a certain amount of skill. So if you tackle it, allow yourself plenty of time. Now you might want to take a look at our Hometime drywall videotape. We go through all these steps in detail. Now, once all our drywall work was done, we put a coat of primer on all the walls and got ready for our cabinets and our doors.
We're changing our standard hanging procedure for doors just a little bit. Most homes in this price range have hollow core doors, which are pretty light. The doors come hanging in the jambs, and you just install the door and the jamb at the same time. But we're going with upgrade doors. These are solid core doors with raised panels. They're made with an oak veneer over a wood composite core. They feel real substantial. They're not going to warp, move around, or open up at the joints, which are all really great, but it makes them a lot heavier. And it's kind of awkward to hold the door and the jamb in place while you're installing it, so the first part of the installation was to take the door off. Well, this is the first time in this project that we've resorted to using pneumatic tools. On a project that a do-it-yourselfer really could do themselves, we often try to use tools that they would typically have around. That doesn't include a couple $100 worth of air tools, hoses, and compressors. When you're installing a door, and you've got the shims behind the jamb, and the jamb is straight, you want to secure it as quickly as possible. You don't want to mess around with pre-drilling and beating the nail in with the hammer. So we broke down and got out the air tools for this part of the carpentry. I already installed the jamb side, so now I'm going ahead and putting the door back on. If you could just, I've got the shim stack there.
Sure.
Just set it on top. I'll get this top one in first, right there. Of course, it's a lot easier taking these off than it is putting them on. I'll get this middle one. Okay, got it.
Okay.
You can go ahead. And then with the door, I'll use that to square up the other 2 sides of the jamb. I use shims to raise the latch side of the jamb until the gap between the door and the top jamb is even across the top of the door.
Then I start nailing the latch side jamb, working from the top down, checking all the while to make sure there's an even gap between the jamb and the side of the door.
Well, with these solid core doors, you want to make sure they're anchored solidly into the framing since they're so heavy. So they left out one standard screw in each of the hinge plates, and I'm replacing those with these long screws that go all the way into the 2x4 trimmer. There we go. Now, of course, when I'm done, I'll take the door off again, store it in a safe place until we stain it, put it back on again for good. To a little awkward situation with this exterior wall. There's a large drain pipe running along the inside of the concrete block wall. You can see the clean out down here near the bottom. So we furred out this wall with 2x6s to hide the pipe. No big deal, except for now this wall is so thick that it creates kind of a tunnel here at the window. That happens a lot in basements. So right now, I'm putting in these extension jambs to start trimming it out. I cut these out of clear pine, and now I'm attaching them to the existing jamb using biscuits. All right, just mark this. I'm just about done with this extension jamb. Unfortunately, the old jamb was not perfectly straight, so I had to make the new one not perfectly square to match the old one. It takes a little bit of work to get this in place. And the last thing I want to do is put some shims in here so I can attach the jamb to the framing. Okay. Let's see.
Once the window and door jambs are installed, we move on to the casing. This usually means miter cutting the pieces where they meet at the corners. Now, over the years of making these miter cuts, we've picked up on a couple tricks. Now, one is to make one of the cuts slightly less than 45 degrees. We'll go at 44 and a half, right there, and tighten it down. And the other is to back bevel your cut. One way to handle that is with a carpenter's pencil. Put that in there so you get a little bit of an angle coming through the wood. This way you get a real nice tight edge on the front part of the wood. But because this is a compound miter box, actually we'll just tilt the saw blade a little bit. Loosen this up. Bring that over. Okay, right there should do it. Now the reason I do this is many times doors aren't perfectly square. Now we're talking just a fraction of a degree. And more times than not, the inside is bowed in just a little bit. And I'll see if this door makes a liar out of me or not. Okay, yeah, it looks like we probably could take just a little bit off the bottom here. So we're probably fairly close back to a 45 degree angle. And this is what will happen is about half the time you'll come back and end up making a slight adjustment. Okay. Now the other thing we've done is slightly back bevel the casing. Now what that means is we take just a little bit of an angle of this wood off so that the very front edge of the wood matches up very closely with this front edge, and that's what gives you the very tight looking joints. Okay. Now once everything is looking splendid, let's put a little little glue on the edge here. And fill it out with your finger a little bit. And grab the gun and we're ready to nail. And just put a few nails here along the side. Keep a good looking margin on the edge. And then follow up with one right along the miter. Get that in a good spot.
Another thing you see a lot in basements is a ledge like this. And we've got a concrete wall going up to that height, and then we've got framing above it. Now once you put framing in front of the concrete block wall to put insulation in there and attach the drywall to, then you've got a pretty wide ledge. So here in the bedroom, we're going to make a shelf out of it and put this oak plywood on top of it. What's complicating is that cut this plywood wide enough so it goes all the way back to that window. Now I'm going to have to notch this out. I'm going to do it on the back side so it doesn't rip up the finish. Since this ledge was longer than 8 feet, I joined 2 pieces of plywood together with biscuits to get it as long as I needed. Now, the sides are covered up with extension jambs, so I had a little bit of room for error when I was notching out this shelf. And to cover up the front edge, I took a piece of baseboard trim that we're using on the bottom of the wall, and I ripped it a little bit narrower. That's what I'm nailing up right now. Right now I'm getting things ready to install tile in the bathroom. This is tile backer board that I'm putting up on the walls in the shower. It's kind of ugly, heavy stuff. That's a pain to work with. Here we go. Well, once you get this up and you get it nailed to the studs, and you get mortar and fiberglass in the joints, it's a beautiful thing to put your tile onto. Now it's crucial to have something behind the tile that isn't going to get damaged if it gets wet. Whoops. And you also want to make sure that it's not going to flex much. Otherwise you're going to end up eventually having cracks in the joints and in the tile down the road, and that's not a good thing. Okay, there we go. And we're also going to put tile on the floor in here. We had what should have been a perfect underlayment, a 4-inch concrete slab, but it started to worry us. And that's when we put down this isolation barrier. It had some cracks running through it. You can see the cracks coming out of the door, and that would eventually transfer through to the tile. That's where this isolation membrane comes in. It's kind of a rubbery goo that you spread out over the floor, and then you just glue your floor tile right on top of it. That way the concrete underlayment can shift and move a little bit while the tile will just float on top without getting damaged. Well, at least that's a theory behind it. It always seemed to work for us anytime we've used it. I better pick this one up.
Well, today, Robin's working on tile in the bathroom. It's kind of small in there, so she's in there by herself. I'm cutting tile and mixing up some adhesive, doing whatever I can to help out there, and also finishing up some woodwork in here. Now, this is the bedroom that we created down here. Actually, this room is probably the furthest along of any room. In fact, once we finish basing this out here, we should be able to start painting and staining. Now, a couple of things about laying base. First of all, you want to make certain that you're nailing into the studs. So I've marked all the stud locations on the floor already. Now this is particularly important if you're going to splice 2 pieces together. You want that splice to land right in the middle of the stud. Now another thing is, we're going to have carpet on this floor. So I'm holding the base up about a 1/2 inch. I'm using a piece of trim to do that. This way the carpet layers can tuck the carpet right underneath the base. Now another thing about doing base is, for a variety of reasons, it looks a lot nicer to do a cope cut on an inside corner as opposed to a couple of 45-degree angles. And that's what I'm working on right now. Now the trick about a cope joint is that you want to cut at a little bit of an angle, kind of a back cut. So this way, if you have to take any off the front, you can have a little bit too much right here on this curve. But then you're not taking off the whole width of the wood, you're just removing a little bit from the front edge. Okay, just a little bit more. Yeah, that looks pretty good there. Okay, now what have we got here? 1, 2, let's see, 3 more cope cuts out here and then 3 more in the closet, so I'll be in here a little while.
Well, I'm about 4 hours into setting tile now. The first hour was just spent figuring out the layout. And when you're laying out tile, you need to figure out where the edges of the tile are going to be most visible. And the 2 spots that I picked out were along the shower stall and in front of the door where the tile is going to meet the carpeting. In those 2 spots, I want to make sure to have full tiles. And then the cut tiles will be in places that'll be less visible, like here along the wall. And no matter where you work your tile layout from, when you set it, you generally start all the way in the room and work your way out the door. And you break the space down into small areas of full tiles. So I've been spreading the mortar out into my little boxes, setting the full tiles, and then cutting and setting the tiles along the walls.
How are you doing on pin set?
Let's see, another 10 or 15 minutes and I'll be ready for another batch.
Okay, all right, well I'm back on baseboard.
Okay. Well, this is the laminate flooring for the office area. Most home centers carry some sort of material like this, so we were able to pick this up ourselves, no problem.
In fact, I think we've picked up just about most of the stuff that's gone on the lower level, except for what, maybe drywall?
Drywall and cabinets, I think that's it.
Yeah. So that might be a pretty good indication in terms of how difficult a project finishing off a lower level is for a do-it-yourself, or you can pick up 90% of it in a pickup. Now the flooring that we're installing down here is one of those laminate floors that you've heard quite a bit about lately. We've done a few of them, had pretty good luck with it. And if your heart is set on having a hardwood floor in a lower level on top of concrete like this, this is a pretty good option. Now it's made out of a real stable material, but what's important is that you have a vapor barrier between the concrete floor and the flooring. So I put down plastic on the floor, then on top of the plastic I'm putting on another pad. Now this will make the floor just a little bit quieter to walk on, plus it also has some temperature insulating capabilities about it. I'm just putting down enough of this so I can get started on the first few rows of the laminate. Now to begin the procedure, it's really important that you get off to a good start with this type of flooring. The rest of the room goes so much easier. So what I'm doing is dry fitting the first 3 rows. I'm staggering it like you would with regular hardwood flooring. Now the reason that I'm dry fitting it like this is just to be able to check everything out. Make sure the wall doesn't look too wavy in relation to the floor. Make sure that it's fairly square to the cabinets and the wall on the other side here, and everything seems to look pretty good. So now what I'll do is take everything apart, glue it up, and then put the whole section back together again. A laminate floor like this is a floating system, which means it kind of lays in here like a well-fit rug. We don't want to attach it, glue it or nail it to a subfloor. We just want it to kind of be able to move a little bit in the room. So the way we attach it is by gluing the joints like this. Now the reason we have the pad down is so that in the process of gluing this up, we don't accidentally glue the floor to the subfloor. get these together real tight like so. And once they're snugged up, just scrape off the excess glue best you can. Now, snugging down the first 3 rows of a floor like this can be a little tricky, especially given the fact that it is a floating floor. So they develop these special straps that make the job a little bit easier. So you tighten up the first 3 rows. Of course, a little bit of glue will come out the top, so just wipe that off, and you can move on to the next rows. And I think quite a few installers will actually use these straps for the whole installation. But I think what I'll be doing, and probably you'll find most do-it-yourselfers will just use a hammer and kind of snug each piece up as they go. And just watch to make sure that they keep nice tight joints. Okay, now to tap this board on here, we can use a special little tapping block. It has a slot along here that we can line up with our tongue, and you just want to hit it very lightly. Make sure everything's lined up here properly. Make sure you get a nice tight joint. Now, it took a lot of cutting to get around those cabinets, but I finally got it done. It would have been a lot easier just to lay all the floor down, set the cabinets on top. But you really can't do that with a floating floor. What happens is the cabinets end up anchoring the floor. And then over time, as the floor expands and contracts, it can pull that flooring apart a little bit, or even possibly buckle it. Now, a good part of the space in here is devoted to cabinets. Now, we used stock office cabinets to create a fairly substantial desk area. In fact, it's large enough for 2 workstations. And what I'm doing right now is working on the countertop. We're using a plastic laminate on top of a particle board base. The process I'm doing right now is scribing. Now, this is where you take the laminate and butt it right up against the wall and find the largest gap between the laminate and the wall, set a compass to that gap, and then run it along the wall to trace the contour of the wall onto the surface. And then what we'll do is go back and just remove everything between the pencil line and the edge here, and we'll have the exact contour of the wall. Okay, it's all scribed.
Great.
You can pull the clamps up. Okay, why don't we just roll it back up here again.
Okay, that
Pull
makes
down a
sense.
little bit. Well, the scribing's all done. Now, I just had to scribe 2 sides. The rest of this we're just letting run wild in the center. We cut it roughly, but it's hanging over about 2 inches. We'll trim that once the laminate's attached to the particle board.
I'm going to get started on the staining. I think I'll work in the bedroom first.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, we should get moving on that. Now, we're attaching these with contact cement. So what that means is I'm applying contact cement to the bottom of the laminate, and then I'll apply it to the top of the particle board, and then we'll let these dry and then put them together. I should get my mask up here. This stuff is pretty heavy smelling. Now, this is a moment of truth. The only thing that separates the laminate from our particle board is the slats that we're using from old mini blinds. And we just pull these out one at a time as we've been moving around here. And as we pull these out and the surfaces make contact, they're glued instantaneously. You don't get any second chance, so you want to be very careful as you move around the field.
While you're doing that, use a special tool called a J-roller to really flatten it out and bond the 2 surfaces together tightly.
Okay, once this is all adhered, then we'll take a router with a special flush cutting laminate bit, and then that will go around the outside edge and give us a nice clean cut. To finish off the desktop, we're nailing a piece of stained varnished wood trim to the front edge. Now, you could also use a thin piece of laminate here instead.
And the decorating style in the rest of the house is stained and varnished oak trim. So we're carrying that style down to the basement. And actually, I like staining woodwork better than painting it. I think it's easier. Anyway, to get started, I'm masking off a couple of places. We will be able to just slop stain and varnish on the walls, but we don't want any stain or varnish on this vinyl trim around the window. So I'm just getting this all prepared. There we go. And normally, I would mask off the glass on French doors like these too, but when we got these from the factory, it had this thin film of plastic on the glass. So we should be able just to slap stain on that and then just peel it off when we're done. Applying stain is pretty easy. You just put it on, wait for a minute, and then wipe it off. And normally, we put it on with a brush, but this painter that we know told us to try this lamb's wool applicator, and now I know why. It holds a lot more stain, which means that you can cover a lot of area without having to reapply the stain, and it doesn't drip like a brush does. Now, wiping it off is real easy, but if you have to achieve a delicate color balance, then you can just adjust the amount of time that you leave the stain on the wood. So if you want a darker color, then obviously you just leave the stain on longer. That'll be a pretty easy day just applying stain all over in the basement, and then the 2 coats of varnish will be 2 long, hard days.
Well, we finished all the staining, and we're going to hold off on the varnishing a little bit, though, so we can wrap up a couple other things. Oh, for instance, I'm going to put this countertop on the vanity in our bathroom. Now, this is made out of reinforced solid surface, which means that we can cut and shape it a little bit. What I've been doing is just scribing the back so it fits against the wall a little bit better. Now, we set our tile before we brought our vanity in here. Now, when you're doing a bathroom, you can many times put the vanities in first and then tile right up to them, or you could do it this way. Now, the reason we went this route is because our vanity has kind of a furniture appearance. It has these little legs underneath, so consequently we had to get all the tile underneath here. Otherwise it would it'd look a little strange. Okay, looks like a pretty good fit. Now, the last thing that I'm going to be doing here to create dust is putting a couple holes in here for the faucet.
We built this countertop for the wet bar the same way that we built the desktop, only this one is going to have a really cute little sink in it. And they call this a kitchen sink. Well, I guess you could use it as sort of a second sink in a kitchen, like near a vegetable prep area or something like that, but I think it works really good as a wet bar sink. Anyway, let's see. Right now I'm getting ready to cut the holes for the faucet. Just plug in. There we go.
Our vanity top comes with 1 hole in it already. I'm drilling 2 more 8-inch centers for our hot and cold water valves.
We're not putting faucets or sinks or anything in, right?
Right, yeah, I think we should just vacuum and then move on to varnishing again. Whenever you're varnishing, you want to keep the dust down in the room. Otherwise it settles on the new varnish and gets locked in. That's why we're wrapping up our final sawing and cutting right now.
we had to let our stain dry overnight. Right now we're putting on our first coat of varnish. Actually, it's not varnish. It's a sanding sealer, which is a softer version of varnish. The sanding sealer seals the wood and raises the grain. So tomorrow, once the sanding sealer is dry, we'll come back in, sand everything down thoroughly, and put on our final coat of varnish. Well, we got everything under control in the varnishing and painting department. Once I'm done painting here in the bedroom, we'll be ready for carpet in here and in the family room. So we're going back and sort of picking up on things that we left hanging, things like all of the plumbing that we got started. We're wrapping that up now. So what I'm doing here in the painting is just cutting in with a brush. And we only need to get a little bit of this paint out onto the wall, just enough so that I can get a roller in there. And this masking tape really helps. I don't have to worry about slopping any paint onto the woodwork. I put this masking tape on shortly after we were done with the staining and the varnishing. And once you cut in an area, you want to go back and roll it out as soon as possible. You don't want that band of paint to dry before you can possibly hit it with the roller. Okay. Ready or not?
Oh, that looks great.
Well, that's going to be it for this program and for this project. Now, obviously, all the different things we did down here are not going to work in every basement, but we did try to give you choices in materials and in design that are interesting, useful, and fairly affordable.
Well, thanks for sticking with us through this project, and hopefully you'll join us for the next one.
See ya.
That really does look nice. Hometime is made possible by Chevy full-size pickup, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickup on the road. The national PBS series Hometime is made possible by the Stanley Works. Since 1843, Stanley has been committed to building quality tools and other products to help you do things right.